The filming of The Abyss was done in a ginormous water tank, and when Ed Harris had tried to swim from hatch to hatch without an oxygen tank, the film crew dragged him too long on a rope to get the shot, and he really did almost die, to the point where he was soul deep pissed off about it. The making of extra of that film is one of the only extras where the magic about the movie is gained rather than lost, because it was such a heroic effort by everyone to get it done. But yeah, Ed Harris almost pops an aneurysm describing that scene and the terror of almost drowning to death. Story 2. The production of Toy Story 2 was under the gun to get things done quickly, and this happened. In one instance, an animator had forgotten to drop his child off at daycare one morning, and in a mental haze forgot the baby in the back seat of the car in the parking lot. Although quick action by rescue workers headed off the worst, the incident became a horrible indicator that the crew was working too hard, wrote David Prince in his 2008 book, The Pixar Touch. Story 3. The mask in Halloween is actually William Shatner's face. The production crew bought the cheapest mask they could find at a Halloween store, which happened to be William Shatner. They spray painted it white. Story 4. I'm surprised no one mentioned The Crow yet. Brandon Lee when a prop master used a pistol for a close-up shot that required dummy bullets to be loaded in. A slug fell out and became lodged in the barrel. The gun was then loaded with blanks and actor Michael Massey fired at Lee. Apparently the lowered velocity of the round and its positioning made the bullet tumble, causing greater damage than perhaps an actual round would have caused. He died during surgery. There was much talk of a Lee family curse. Added to the already iconically gothic look and the attitude of the film, the ghost stories spelled big box office. It was critically acclaimed and has a huge cult following. Story 5. Roman Polanski directed Rosemary's Baby in '68. The following year, his wife, Sharon Tate, was murdered by the Mason family. The murder was directed by Charles Manson after repeated listening to the Beatles' White Album. He felt there was a hidden message in the songs that told of a coming apocalyptic race war between whites and blacks, which he called Helter Skelter. Over a decade later, John Lennon was murdered outside his apartment building by Mark David Champman. The building was the same one used in filming Rosemary's Baby. Story 6. The Conqueror. The film is sometimes called an RKO radioactive picture. It was filmed near a nuclear test site, and the set was contaminated by nuclear fallout. Photographs exist of John Wayne holding a Geiger counter. After a location shooting, contaminated soil was transported back to Hollywood in order to match the interior shooting done there. Over the next 20 years, many actors and crew members developed cancer. People magazine researched the cast and crew's health for an article. By the time it was published in November of 1980, 91 of the 220 cast and crew members had developed cancer. 46 had perished, including John Wayne, Susan Hayward, Pedro Armendariz, who shot himself after learning he had terminal cancer, Agnes Moorehead, John Hoyt, and director Powell. That's a famous story, but not uncommon. When my mother was a young woman in the late 40s, early 50s, she and some friends were driving through the Southwest while a nuclear test was being conducted just hundreds of miles away. She remembered their car being hit with an odd wind carrying strange-looking sand and other particulates that came through the windows before they shut them and completely covered the car. She passed of cancer at age 49. Story 7. The Omen was marked by an apparent curse following the production of the film. Having changed its name from The Antichrist to The Birthmark, the film seemed to fall victim of a sinister curse. Star Gregory Peck and screenwriter David Seltzer took separate planes to the UK, yet both planes were struck by lightning. While producer Harvey Bemard was in Rome, lightning just missed him. Rottweilers hired for the film attacked their trainers. A hotel at which director Richard Donner was staying at got bombed by the IRA. He was also struck by a car. After Peck canceled another flight to Israel, the plane he would have chartered crashed, obliterated all on board. On day one of the shoot, several principal members of the crew survived a head-on car crash. The jinx appeared to persist well into post-production, when special effects artist John Richardson was injured and his girlfriend in an accident on the set of A Bridge Too Far. Story 8. In the first XXX, there's a scene where Vin Diesel's character rappels down from a line from his parachute to a submarine going under a nearby bridge. In the final shots, it seems as though our hero gets under the bridge and on the submarine just in time. In reality, however, during the second take, the stuntman doing the scene unfortunately hit the bridge while sliding down the wire, and later passed. Story 9. The remains in the rainy poltergeist pool scene were real skeletons. In the original Texas Chainsaw Massacre, Gunnar Henson, Leatherface, accidentally cut Marilyn Burns' finger in the dinner scene because he was exhausted and could barely see. The cast and crew of the 2005 Amityville Horror kept waking up inexplicably at 3:15 a.m. while filming. This is the same time Ryan Reynolds' character mysteriously wakes up every night in the film. After the first day of filming The Conjuring, Vera Farmiga found 3 unexplained claw marks on her skin. Shelley Duvall, who played Wendy Torrance in The Shining, said the amount of emotional distress from filming was excruciating and unbearable. During the chestbuster scene in Alien, the actors didn't know what was about to happen, so their absolutely horrified reactions are real. While filming Poltergeist, Oliver Robbins, aka Robbie, truly got choked by the robot clown doll. It wasn't until he turned purple that Spielberg realized what was happening. An actual human skull was used in the first model of the iconic alien creature. The creepy, possessed Annabelle doll from The Conjuring is based on a real, possessed Raggedy Ann doll. The schoolhouse in Hitchcock's The Birds is a real-life haunted house, and its current residents say they hear footsteps and children laughing. While on the set of The Exorcist, director William Friedkin told the prop man to randomly fire shotgun blanks to get more authentic reactions from the actors. Hannibal Lecter was based on an actual killer, Dr. Alfredo Bali Torrevino, who had the same mannerisms Anthony Hopkins portrayed in The Silence of the Lambs. Multiple actors from the Poltergeist movies died tragically, either during or after filming. Story 10. One of my favorite bits of IMDb trivia for Suspiria, director Dario Argento's original idea was that the ballet school would accommodate young girls not older than 12. However, the studio producer, Salvatore Argento, his father, denied his request because a film this violent involving children would almost certainly be banned. Dario raised the age limit of the girls to 20, but didn't rewrite the script, hence the naivety of the characters and the occasionally childlike dialogue. He also put all the doorknobs at about the same height as the actresses' heads, so they would have to raise their arms in order to open the doors, just like children. Story 11. Even though it's well known, one of my favorites is from Alien. During the chest-bursting scene, the cast didn't know what was going to happen, so the reactions you see in the film are of real shock and terror. Story 12. In Silence of the Lambs, the combination of liver, fava beans, and Chianti actually had a deeper meaning to it. Liver, fava beans, and a glass of antioxidant-packed red wine. Sounds like a relatively healthy combination, right? Not if you're taking a class of antidepressants known as monoamine oxidase inhibitors, or MAOIs for short. In 1992's Silence of the Lambs, Hannibal Lecter, Anthony Hopkins, warns Dr. Claire Starling, Jodie Foster, against pushing him too far with her questions, explaining how he dealt with a census taker who had also bored him. He utters one of the film's most iconic lines, "I ate his liver with some fava beans and nice Chianti." Author Thomas Harris, on whose novel the movie was based, probably didn't choose that combination arbitrarily. As Reddit user Mr. Chapman first pointed out earlier this year, people taking MAOIs are given a long list of high tyramine foods and beverages to avoid or limit. On that list, liver, fava beans, and red wine. Although MAOIs are most commonly used to treat depression, they also have proven effective in treating people who have various personality disorders. As an FBI trainee, Starling may or may not have caught the fact that this meant Lecter, a psychiatrist himself, wasn't taking his meds, because that combination on a MAOI could prove fatal. Story 13. In the original Dawn of the Dead, an old-fashioned photo booth can be seen in many shots, standing near the hidden entrance of the hero's apartment. Now, the mall was still open during the day, with filming only taking place before opening and after closing, so all the stores and kiosks are real and working, photo booth included. Some of the extras in full zombie makeup took photos in the booth and replaced sample photos on the side of the booth with them. Story 14. Alien. When the crew sees the first-time egg chamber, you can see something moving inside the egg. It's Ridley Scott's hands. Some cinemas removed the chestburster scene after some visitors have puked. After Ripley refused to let the crew on board due to quarantine rules after the accident with the facehugger, she gets slapped in the face by Lambert. This stood not in the script, and Sigourney W. was surprised. Story 15. Jack Ketchum's The Girl Next Door. It started with a Stand By Me vibe, then it got worse and worse. Make-believe monsters don't do it for me anymore, but sadistic kids and a girl screaming for mercy gave me nightmares for a while. And if you're feeling really brave, try reading the entire true story that the movie was based on. The reality is even more horrifying. I don't know why this gets mentioned so rarely. I saw this on Netflix a while ago and was just emotionally drained from the entire experience. Disgusted with humanity, sickened by the monster in all of us, and painfully aware of the fact that the only thing worse than a monster is the silence we refuse to break to help the helpless. It's our fault. It always is. Story 16. Frankenstein is pictured as green in a lot of art, movies, etc. because in the B&W version, they used green makeup so it would look better in B&W. This is the same reason the witch in The Wizard of Oz was green. They wanted a color that would pop in Technicolor they were filming. Jason was originally going to be called Josh, or some other really soft name, but one of the guys felt that that wasn't intimidating enough, so they picked Jason because that was his childhood bully's name. In the original Nightmare on Elm Street script, all the victims were the siblings of the kids Freddy had slain when he was alive. They had the hardest time getting Scream as an R movie instead of unrated, because the MPAA hated the line, "Movies don't make serial killers, they make serial killers more creative." So the guy going to them just convinced them the movie was a comedy. Story 17. Reagan's in The Exorcist was just pea soup. Frank's final line, "Jesus wept," from Hellraiser, was improvised by the actor. It was supposed to just be "F you," but the actor thought his version was more cryptic. It is a line he carries around with him, and it's the shortest verse in the Bible. Stanley Kubrick berated and yelled at Shelby Duvall during the filming of The Shining to make her feel truly attacked and frightened. As an ex-firefighter, Jack Nicholson was quite handy with an axe, so much so that he cut down the door too quickly in The Shining for Kubrick to get the scene he wanted, and they had to do several retakes. In 28 Days Later, the wide shots of Jim walking through a deserted London were actually shot on location. The film crew managed to completely clear out one of the most tourist-inhabited areas on the planet. Story 18. Antichrist. Deeply violent, but more than that, this film will linger in your skull and make you repulsed by the idea of sharing a bed with your significant other. What cruelty we commit upon each other in the name of love. The Conjuring. Director James Wan is brilliantly skilled at creating an atmosphere where there doesn't need to be anything there to make you shit your pants. There's a lengthy scene where two girls are staring at a dark corner, one describing what she sees there, and it will forever haunt me. Human Centipede. Whereas the second and third films are gore and weirdness for the sake of gore and weirdness, the first film does a magnificent job of making you acutely aware of how fragile your sense of self is. When suddenly you are one more set of limbs eating the shit of a man in front of you. What the f does your identity even still mean? Martyrs. I was very hesitant to add this to the list. Martyrs is a magnificent film that will sit with you for hours after it's over. But mostly it's just very grim and unpleasant, right up until the last few moments. The final frames before the credits are pure nightmares. I Saw the Devil. Wrapping up with a Korean revenge thriller that presents evil and insanity as basically an infection. When you will do anything to avenge a dead loved one, what stops you from becoming one more monster? Story 19. Candyman, 1992. I saw this when I was pretty young. I grew up watching classic horror movies and shows like Tales from the Crypt. Even from a very young age, this stuff didn't bother me. I was probably about 7 when I saw Candyman, and it bothered the f*** out of me. I had nightmares for a month. I think it was the scene where she's crawling out of the fire with the baby and her skin is all burnt off, or the ribcage full of bees. Story 20. Count Orlok only blinks once in Nosferatu, near the end of the first arc. And another fun one is Evil Dead 2, in which you can see Freddy's glove in the tool shed. To add to this, the Freddy glove was a wave back to Wes Craven, because there was an Evil Dead poster hanging up in Johnny Depp's room in the first Nose. To add even further, the Evil Dead had a poster for The Hills Have Eyes torn in half in the basement. The Hills Have Eyes had a scene, I don't remember where the poster for Jaws was displayed, torn in half. Craven felt that since Jaws was generally considered the scariest film ever made at the time, logic dictates that if Jaws is scary, and Jaws exists in the world of THHE, then obviously THHE must be much scarier than Jaws because it's real. So if THHE is scarier than Jaws, then The Evil Dead must be scarier than THHE if THHE exists in TED world. And thus began the back and forth between Raimi and Craven. Story 21. The Blob is supposedly based on a true story. In September of 1950, a couple of police officers saw a mysterious object fall from the sky, and when they came to the place where they thought it landed, they found a purple, jelly-like mass, which later evaporated without leaving a trace. Story 22. The classic Universal monster movies had a huge resurgence in popularity when they were syndicated for TV in the 50s and 60s, where they attracted an audience of mostly children, who came to be known as the Monster Kid generation due to how widespread the horror genre got. Basically every horror writer and dictator who became native in the next few decades had been one of those kids, and it shows in their work. There are a lot of post-60s movies where at least one character is a kid or a teen who is obsessed with monsters. Fright Night, Monster Squad, Creepshow, Friday the 13th, 4, Deadly Spawn, Manatee, Lost Boys, It, Return of the Living Dead, and many others. Story 23. Twilight was originally supposed to be a very different film. Originally it was going to be way different from the books and be more like Blade in high school, which sounds way better than the crappy movie we ended up getting. Story 24. In Sleepaway Camp, when all the kids go camping and the counselor leaves them behind to take two cold kids back to their bunks, one of the kids was supposed to wake up and scream. Instead, they fell asleep and forced the director to tilt down to an axe instead. Story 25. The graveyard in the opening scene of Texas Chainsaw Massacre was filmed in Baghdad Cemetery on Baghdad Road in Leander, Texas. Currently on Baghdad Road, across from the Baghdad Cemetery, is a barbecue joint. I'm not sure where exactly they get their meat from, but as long as it has that sweet, sweet Smoky Moe's sauce, I'm okay with it. Story 26. John Carpenter, Nick Castle, the original Michael Myers, and Tommy Lee Wallace, director of Halloween 3, Season of the Witch, briefly formed a musical trio, the Coupe de Villes. They released an album, Waiting Out the 80s, and performed the title track for Big Trouble in Little China. In a scene towards the end of Candyman, Tony Todd had real bees in his mouth. Also, Virginia Madison is extremely allergic to bees. David Warner was originally down to play Freddy Krueger, but scheduling conflicts meant he couldn't commit. Story 27. The Night House plays with liminal space and perception of shadows, negative space, and sometimes you think you see something, but it really is nothing, and other times, there is something there in the nothingness. Really well done effects in this one. Story 29. So this might not be quite what you're looking for, but the movie Head Count is about a group of kids in a desert bungalow and a shape-shifting creature. Many times as the camera moves throughout the house, there are one too many people. Sometimes it's obvious, and sometimes it's not. It's a super fun movie to watch, and I highly recommend it. Also, I'm pretty sure The Ritual has a few creatures looming in the background scenes. Story 30. This is basically the formula all of the Hell House LLC movies used. Camera pans across a room. Everything seems normal. Camera pans back across room. Now a shadowy figure is in the corner, or a mannequin that was facing away is now facing the camera. If you're into those sort of scares, you will probably enjoy Hell House. Story 31. Surprised I haven't seen it mentioned here yet. In the 2017 It, in the library, when Ben is reading the books about the history of Derry, the librarian is in the background just staring at Ben and smiling super creepy. Story 32. It's not at all a horror movie, and not really in the background as far as something moving in the background of a shot. So I'm not really answering your question, but the movie Searching, thriller about a father looking for his missing daughter, told only through his computer screen, has an alien invasion subplot hidden in it. It's not really a part of the movie, and more of an Easter egg, but I think it's a really funny detail. Story 33. The Shining. A lot of weird sounds in the background, especially during Doc and Danny's conversation in the kitchen area.